So many of you have been comparing Tower of Fantasy, which is an MMORPG, to Genshin Impact, which is a cooperative action RPG. I wanted to make a video properly comparing both since many of you have been asking for it. Now, I don't think these games should be directly compared as they are two completely different games, filling two different genres, but hey, you guys asked for it, so let's have fun with this. Let's start with the similarities of both games simply to get them out of the way. Both games are open world anime action RPGs heavily relying on farming for gear and progression items in order to make sure your characters and weapons are powered up enough for specific tasks. Due to the anime cel shading that's implemented in both games, they hold similarities but they don't really exactly look alike. Both of them are incredibly beautiful, but these games used different methods of cel shading implementations in order to give each game a specific look. It's easy to think they both look alike, but without both of them sitting together, you really won't see the difference. So now let's move on to the battle systems in each game. Genshin Impact uses a system that heavily relies on character switching. Each character has an element and weapon type within a pool of elements and weapons. For example, Chungyun is a cryo-type claymore user, which really means he's an ice elemental character that utilizes a heavy two-handed sword, while Hu Tao is a pyro-type pole arm user, which really means she's a fire-type lance user. The combat is fast and very fun, but it's very reliant on the fact that you must have a good team composition in order to take out some of the harder enemies at the higher world levels. Now, Tower of Fantasy on the other hand utilizes one character that is selected at the very beginning, which is just a male or female. This game contains no classes or character switching. Instead, the game heavily relies on weapon switching. Similar to Genshin Impact, there are weapons with specific elements, but in this game, your one character can choose to utilize any weapon that you choose to play. However, the weapon switching has a nice twist to it. There are 3 weapon slots for fast switching, but each slot has a specific role. The 3 roles are damage dealing, shield shattering, and buff/healing. It's important to place the correct weapon type in the correct slot for the most effective play and getting the most out of the weapons that you acquire. Most enemies will be easy to defeat with the damage dealing weapon, but the harder enemies will require strategy by switching between shield shattering, damage dealing, and buffing/healing weapons. This battle system is also really fast, and since Tower of Fantasy is an MMORPG, anyone can join in on your fights in the open world, which adds a fantastic dynamic to gameplay, especially when fighting world bosses, so it's really satisfying. Both battle systems are fun and similar, but also very different, given they require a type of switching, but the reason for switching in both games are very different as explained above. Genshin Impact can be played entirely alone, with each character filling a role, but Tower of Fantasy is an MMORPG with many enemies that aren't meant to be defeated alone. The game also scales with your levels, so as you get stronger, so do the enemies in the world, while Genshin Impact requires world level ascension before enemies get any kind of harder, and you can also bring down your world level when the enemies are a bit too much for you, making the game a bit easier for those who just want to progress and gain specific items. However, Genshin Impact punishes you for lowering the world level, as you may not acquire rare artifacts that are in the world from the world bosses if your world level is too low, and the rates change depending on your world level. Let's move on from the battle system to open world mechanics in Genshin Impact and Tower of Fantasy. Both games contain a massive open world that contain various different regions. However, Tower of Fantasy, currently in its beta stages, still feels like it's more complete, with the entire map being explorable during the beta. Genshin Impact is taking more of a live service approach, as the game relies on its future expansion in order to access more regions of the map. However, the map in Genshin Impact is already huge and full of life, so once all of the regions are finally in place and available, the map is going to be so much larger than what Tower of Fantasy currently offers. I'm sure that new areas will come in the future as Tower of Fantasy grows, but there's no indication of such a thing happening at this moment as it's currently in its beta stages. Another thing that I want to make sure I point out is that both games contain very aggressive enemies. but I can't help but feel like the enemies in Tower of Fantasy are a bit too aggressive. Enemies that are very weak rush to attack you, and since the world is filled with enemies at almost every corner, this can be a bit annoying when making changes to your weapons or making build changes in your menus. At this moment, Tower of Fantasy does feel as if there's more to it than Genshin Impact, but I honestly feel like that may change in the near future as the world is expanded upon. Now, let's talk about progression. Both games have a system where you can obtain various versions of lower tier weapons and use them as materials to feed the stronger weapons. There's also a few materials specifically made for weapon progression and character progression as well. You can also enhance your weapons in both games using a star rating system. However, Tower of Fantasy does keep you from leveling your weapon too strong before reaching a specific character level. Genshin Impact, on the other hand, doesn't have such a restriction and also features a material for leveling up your characters instead of relying on simply gaining experience from fighting in quests. Your character's progression will rely on these character experience items as well as locating various materials within the world to level up your skills and constellations. Tower of Fantasy relies on the more traditional system of gaining experience through opening chests, defeating enemies, and advancing in quests. However, both games have different ways to slow down your growth from being a bit too fast. Genshin Impact contains an energy system by the name of Resin that doesn't allow you to collect essential progression items such as artifacts, character experience materials, and more without surrendering a huge chunk of resin. Tower of Fantasy doesn't have such a system. However, you can reach a daily experience cap, which can prevent you from leveling up your character and collecting experience till the next day. However, Genshin Impact recently removed the requirement for resin within their limited time events, making the live service aspect of this game very important to character growth. Tower of Fantasy has various optional events that are available every single day, which are mostly PvP and co-op dungeon grinding. Now for the final and most important part of the comparison, which is the monetization practices within each game. Genshin Impact utilizes a gacha system, which is very transparent, but it's also very unforgiving to those who can't spend a massive amount of time in the game collecting Primogems every single day. And Primogems are the premium currency for acquiring new characters and weapons within the game. While I do feel like the gacha system should be revamped just a tad because the rates are a little too low for some of the characters that people really want to acquire, I personally don't have an issue with gacha titles because of the fact that they're delivering a free game that you can just download, play, and enjoy and don't have to spend any kind of money on. Now, on the other side of the boat, Tower of Fantasy hasn't displayed their monetary practices for this game thus far, but it appears that this game may contain a lot of pay-to-win elements which will suck for those participating in PvP. If you aren't going to participate in PvP, it doesn't seem like this is going to harm your experience too much. We don't know what will be purchasable at this moment, but here's to hoping that it's just cosmetic or simply material related. So that's it for this video. I'm personally going to leave you all to form your own opinions, as my stance on this is that I simply enjoy and like both games for what they are. Let me know what you think and prefer in the comment section below, as well as liking and subscribing to my channel to support the growth of the channel. Anyways, you all have a fantastic day. Stay healthy and stay safe. Chaotic out.